Superstition, fanaticism, that's what religion is all about. And therefore, what we have to do is stamp out this whole thing entirely.
Streets carrying the word saint are renamed. Religious icons are destroyed and replaced with tributes to the new saint, Marat.
The church came to seem simply the enemy to the radical revolutionaries. Churches and cathedrals are simply stripped of their altars. Stained glass is smashed, statues are smashed, the wealth of the churches is simply carted off. Of course, for European opinion, this was something even more shocking than the death of the king.
Not even the Christian calendar is spared. Years are no longer numbered from the birth of Christ, but from September 1792, the proclamation of the Republic. It is now year 1. Months are renamed according to the seasons. July becomes Thermidor, April, Florial. Months are broken into 3 weeks of 10 days each.
The revolutionary calendar was certainly designed as a kind of weapon against Christianity, against Christian belief. Of course, by having a 10-day week, you'd no longer have Sundays, so people wouldn't even know what day Sunday was anymore. That's what they hoped.
The terror spreads across France. Insurrections are put down with swift, unrelenting brutality. In the city of Lyon, where counter-revolutionaries are gaining ground, the National Convention's representative sets a brutal example. Hundreds of rebels are tied up, marched into fields, and mowed down en masse. The Vendée region in the west of France has also become a counter-revolutionary stronghold. Rebels and priests are tied up and drowned in the Loire, a national bath to accompany the national razor. Up to 100,000 people are killed in the Vendée alone. In Paris, the guillotine falls at an ever more frenetic pace. Now the French armies are beginning to win victories. With the help of a brilliant young commander named Napoleon Bonaparte, rebellious Toulon is recaptured and the Royal Navy forced to evacuate. The revolution is fighting back. Robespierre is at the height of his power. He had taken on the enemies of the revolution and ensured its success through terror.
For a time, the terror was very effective as a means of getting the country together, getting the government together, and fighting what was, after all, a war on several fronts. On the Eastern Front and on the Northern Front against external enemies, also a civil war in the Vendée, which was the bloodiest of all, also a civil war against the supporters of the Gironde and other revolutionaries who had turned against the government in Paris.
The terror has achieved its goals, but it does not stop, and it will not stop until it devours the very man who unleashed it, Maximilien Robespierre. With the bloodletting of the terror, Robespierre has saved the revolution. An invigorated army repels attacks at the border, and internal dissent has been all but quashed. But Robespierre has now set his sights on a loftier goal: to use more terror to create a new kind of society, a republic of virtue.
By virtue, he means civic virtue. It's an active principle for Robespierre. For example, you cannot be a virtuous citizen by simply obeying the laws and keeping your head down. You must actively be involved in the work of the state, and that includes for Robespierre destroying the enemies of the state.
On the 5th of February 1794, Robespierre gives a speech outlining his philosophy. Terror without virtue is disastrous, he declares, but virtue without terror is powerless.
He associates terror with virtue. Terror at that moment becomes in his thinking an instrument by which you create virtue.
But others disagree. For Danton, the revolution is heading down the wrong path. He and his followers, the Dantonists, believe it is time to bring terror to an end. It has served its purpose, and is in danger of feeding the revolutionaries into their own fire.
By the spring of 1794, things are beginning to go better. The food situation is no longer so bad, and the war effort is going better. And Danton is basically saying we need to get a new footing for the government. We need to move to a kind of normalization. Robespierre believes it's too soon. Danton will start organizing a group to argue that we should end the terror. Robespierre will see this as a direct threat to the government. He will not see it as just a difference of opinion about the direction of policy. He will see it as potential treason.
And in Robespierre's Republic of Virtue, there is only one response to treason. The Dantonists are rounded up and quickly sentenced to death. Robespierre has sent thousands to their deaths, but is uneasy with the actual process. He will not attend the beheadings of his former friends and allies. As he steps up to the blade, with typical bravado, Danton tells the executioner, "You will show my head to the people. It is worth seeing." With the Dantonists out of the way, Robespierre launches France into an even bloodier, more horrifying new phase: the Great Terror.
The Great Terror is the name given to the last phase of the terror in the spring of 1794 into the summer of 1794. It's the period at which the tempo of executions really starts to increase, at which the atmosphere of paranoia, particularly in Paris, but really across the country, starts to increase exponentially. You can track the number of executions until it's up to almost 800 per month in Paris, towards the end even more.
The scale of bloodletting is unprecedented, but on the 6th of June 1794, the roll of the tumbrils comes to a halt. The guillotine hangs silent. Robespierre has declared a new religious holiday, the Festival of the Supreme Being. He wants to replace the old Catholic God with a new rational devotion.
One thing about Robespierre is that he never supported these atheist policies. He believed that people needed a divinity to believe in. And he helped sponsor this cult that was called the Cult of the Supreme Being, with this extraordinary tableau in Paris in, I believe it was June of 1794, which had choirs of people dressed in white singing. You had this kind of papier-mâché mountain that was built in the center of Paris. And then at the critical moment of the ceremony, you had Robespierre himself sort of emerging on the top of this mountain, clad in a toga, and marching down. And I think at this moment, a lot of people felt, all right, who does he really think he is? Does he think he's God here? Does he think he's the king?
With the Great Terror spiraling out of control, Robespierre's colleagues see the festival as his departure from the realm of reality.
There are those who think that Robespierre really has reached so extreme and so unreasonable a position that he can't turn back, that his fanaticism has somehow overtaken him, and there are those who think he's just gone nuts.
Once again, Robespierre's suspicions seem to focus on those closest to him. On the 26th of July, now the 8th of Thermidor, he appears at the convention and gives a 4-hour speech, insinuating that there are traitors in their midst.
Robespierre makes a tactical error. He comes in and announces that he has a new list of enemies of the Republic, but he won't give the list. Therefore, everyone is afraid they might be on the list, and when he comes back the next day to give the list, he is arrested before he can speak.
An unexpected chorus of voices shouts Robespierre down. He is stunned into silence. The convention orders the arrest of Robespierre and 4 of his supporters. He will never have another opportunity to address the convention. The following day, Robespierre is freed by his supporters, but immediately declared an outlaw and recaptured by the National Guard. In the process, one of Robespierre's allies throws himself out of a window. Another shoots himself on the spot. And Robespierre is found semi-conscious, with a bullet wound to the face, his jaw shattered from an apparent suicide attempt. Robespierre spends his last hours on a table in an anteroom of the National Convention. As he is ridiculed and insulted by his former colleagues, Robespierre is unable to respond. The Grand Master of Oratory has been silenced. In the Conciergerie, where the last Queen of France had preceded him, Robespierre is prepared for the national razor. The French Revolution, with its origins in noble hopes for liberty and equality, has become a monstrous exercise in political murder and civil war. At its head had been Robespierre, convinced that only terror and absolute ruthlessness could save the revolution from its many enemies. But the atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia that he has created will require him as its final victim.
It turns out that there is a great deal of enthusiasm for ending the terror. Nobody can figure out how to do it. And what turns out to be the case is that the only thing that will end the terror, and apparently the only thing they can all agree upon, is the fall of Robespierre.
On the 27th of July, 1794, the guillotine comes down on the incorruptible, and the last blood of the terror is shed. The terror dies with Robespierre, but the revolution does not. The rights of man, democracy, the new republic, the impact of these revolutionary achievements would far outlive any of the revolutionaries themselves. France would enter a period of uncertainty, frozen between fear of another terror or a return to the oppressive monarchy that preceded it. 5 stagnant years would pass before power once again consolidated in the hands of a single man, Napoleon Bonaparte. Whether Napoleon betrayed the revolution or consolidated its achievements is still keenly debated. His meteoric rise was certainly only possible because of the revolution.
The revolution was the first and enduring model of a people taking its destiny in its own hands. The idea that the subjects of the oldest, the most established, the most glorious monarchy in Europe could decide to completely rewrite their history was something that had extraordinary resonance.
The revolution tore apart the old feudal fabric of France and changed the course of Western civilization. The issues it raises still carry a powerful significance today.
The question raised by the French Revolution is how much violence is justified in achieving a better society? Do people have the right to overthrow what they see as an unjust system, to replace it with what they are convinced in their hearts is a more just system? How much violence is justified in doing that? We still face this question today.
More than 200 years after the birth of the French Republic, the ghost of Robespierre hangs over revolutions from Russia to Vietnam, China to Latin America. The French experiments with democracy have inspired models all over the world. Wherever tyranny takes root, the cry for justice can be heard, for liberty, equality, fraternity, for revolution.